the reason. Like I couldn't feel exactly what I'm crying about. It was like without obvious reason. And I realized that I needed help. I needed professional help. And I tried several therapists until I found the right one. And, through therapy, I realized that over the probably 10 years of my life, I was accumulating a lots of sadness and grief, and I didn't address them. I didn't process them in the right way. And that's how I ended up with depression the first time. Right. I had several breakups with my partners. I broke up with my fiance. I lost my father. And I was trying to kind of skip over it and keep moving because there will be some positive things in life, just cheer up and life will get better. And I didn't, I guess, value those feelings like sadness and grief. I didn't want to look at them. I didn't want to acknowledge them and give them space. And that's how I ended up depressed.
I know for me, I went through something similar. There was a time where I was living on my own
Mm-hmm.
and I thought that I was free from my parents' control. I moved to a different part of the city. I was making new friends. And there was one year that was particularly bad, similar to what you mentioned, right? My
Mm-hmm.
parents' divorce, I almost lost the job that I had, and I had a relationship that ended all within a few months of each other. And I don't think I went through depression, but what I think looking back, what I went through was I was grieving because I knew the old me was being changed into the new me because all these things were going on. And I look back at that version of terrain and I was put in a situation where I had to sink or swim. Is that something
Mm-hmm.
that you were thinking to yourself, thinking, you know what, I'm Polina. Either I'm going to let this consume me and I go to spiral into a very dark period, which a lot of people go through, or I need to figure something out because now I'm depressed. Where do I go from here?
Yeah, I think you're right about grief. Like I find honestly, three of my depressions definitely were associated with grief, all of them. The grief was starting point for them, or maybe catalyst, for all of them, because I think grief is such a misunderstood feeling. Because I think for many people, grief is only about losing a loved one, but it actually is such a complicated feeling and such a common feeling because sometimes we can grieve our identity, right? That is no longer there. Sometimes we can grieve a life that could happen but didn't happen. We can grieve about our plans, right? That could have happened within relationship, for example, that we had, right? And so I think grief is definitely a contributor. And my experience was that I didn't want to look into it. I was trying to avoid it and I didn't want it to affect me. But then I was forced to, look at this and accept, yes, I'm grieving, the passing of my dad and I'm grieving my relationship that didn't happen. And I had to allow myself to feel this grief. And honestly, and I know, by the way, many of my clients that I talk to, for example, sometimes they would say, I can't allow myself grief. I don't have time for this. I have to survive. But I think we can actually go over this process faster. I don't know if faster is applicable here, but in the more natural way when we allow ourselves to feel it as deep as it's possible right now. Does it make
I will
sense?
agree. Yeah, it does, because I think we prioritize our trauma, right? So I'll give you an example. If I know that my family member is sick and they're going to pass, right? But I'm struggling financially, I'm struggling to put food on the table, I have to make a choice. Which trauma
Exactly.
am I going to focus on, right? It's going to be the food and shelter versus that. So I think it's more of what people call jokingly a first world problem where you're prioritizing your different traumas. But if you're poor, the only thing that's on your mind is I'm poor, I need food, I need shelter. But when you're grieving, it's like, okay, the old me is dying. It's being changed. Like it's easier to identify grief when someone has physically died, right? But what about the emotional side? What about the mental side, saying that I'm a different terrain, I'm a different Polina,
Mhm. Mhm.
but I have these other things that I need to focus on, and you have to juggle it because let's be honest, how many people can deal with multiple traumas all at the same time,
Right.
right?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. You know, when I moved to the US, that was a time for my second depression. And I felt so deeply depressed because, you know, I felt like a fish just thrown out of water, you know, and like I lost my, in a way, kind of, I lost my community, my friends, my family, like all of that was left back in Russia. And I was faced with a completely new environment, new culture, new language, and I had to figure out who am I here? And that's where I got so depressed because I couldn't find myself. I couldn't find a place for myself. And I talked to other women who moved like me, and they're like, what are you talking about? We didn't have time for depression. We had to survive. We had to make money, you know? And I found myself, okay, I probably am in the privileged position where I can feel all these feelings. And other people who moved to the US just didn't have a luxury of it.